Hi, I'm here today to talk about one of the most exciting new innovations in cybersecurity, and that is the concept of identity protection. What we're going to talk about today is what is identity protection. Identity management has become one of the hottest issues in cybersecurity today because if you look at the attack vectors of the last 12 months, literally identity management is the top two attack vectors that hackers are using. Our 2024 IBM X4 Threat Intelligence Index shows that 30% of all attacks in the last 12 months were phishing, and another 30% were actually leveraging a compromised valid account. So identity management has become the predominant attack vector, and identity protection has evolved in the last couple of years to be focused on addressing exactly that. So we're going to answer that question today. Identity protection is actually three different things. The first thing that it is identity protection is one of the critical elements of properly addressing what's called the identity fabric. The identity fabric is how do we manage identities across the hybrid reality that almost everybody has today. So that includes 7 elements. First, we have the ability to do orchestrated workflows, to do things like add frictionless support to legacy applications. Second is the ability to do risk-based authentication to add AI-based behavioral analysis to authentication. So when someone leverages a compromised valid account, one of the primary attack forms is that you can tell it's not them using that account. Third is legacy application gateways that allow you to pull in the legacy apps into the latest identity management controls, such as frictionless access. Fourth is this topic of identity protection, which we're going to dive into next. Fifth is directories and directory synchronization, so you can answer the question that nobody seems to be able to answer today, which is show me a single view of who has access to any of your systems. Sixth is identity governance, so you have proper onboarding and offboarding and management of identities. And then seventh is privileged account management, so you make sure you're addressing something that cyber insurance providers have been focused on, which is, have you really rolled out privileged account protection across the board? And in fact, they're threatening not to renew policies, so it's become a big issue. So that's the first thing that identity protection is, a critical element of addressing the hybrid nature of identities today through the identity fabric. The second thing that identity protection is the combination of two brand new innovative spaces in cybersecurity. First is identity threat detection and response. Identity threat detection and response is pointing out the fact that traditionally the way people identify identity-focused threats is by sitting in their SIM tool and their security operations center and waiting for like a user behavior analytics tool to deduce that there's an identity problem. That is far too passive for the fact that identities had become the predominant attack vector. So ITDR is focused on how do I find and manage those threats close to the identity source. It's a combination of that with another brand new space, which is called identity security posture management. You know, it's kind of funny because right now the whole concept of fabrics and posture are really hot in cybersecurity across all the spaces. And what that is applied against identity management is really profound. It's doing things like, how can I find poor posture in my configurations that could lead to an attack being more successful down the road? Things like multi-factor authentication bypass, finding shadow directories and stuff like that, right? So you have to have good posture and then be able to find the threats as they're happening. That's the second thing identity protection is. It's a combination of ITDR and ISPM. The third thing that identity protection is, and this is the most profound impact, is that it links the security operations center with the identity and access management stack intimately for the first time. In most organizations, the SOC is operating, the identity technologies are operating, and there's not a really close linkage between those tools, especially around threat detection and response. Identity protection, because of the combination of these two spaces, does exactly that. So let's look for a moment about what this stuff actually does. The value in identity protection by combining ITDR and ISPM is it provides three different things. The first thing that it does is it shows us identity blind spots. Now, what are identity blind spots? Identity blind spots are finding things like shadow assets that people are accessing that we weren't aware they're accessing. It's finding things like shadow directories, where you have people authenticating against a directory that you didn't even realize was out there. We're finding everybody's got them and they just didn't know they were there, right? So that concept of finding blind spots that we weren't aware of, it's also finding things like unauthorized application access, like unauthorized SaaS apps that we didn't know about. That's the first thing, is identifying identity blind spots. The second thing that identity protection does is it finds identity infrastructure gaps. So what does that mean? That's finding things like misconfigurations that would enable an attack to be more effective than we would want it to be, of course, and then also hazardous deviations in policy. So you might have a security policy put in that say access to this application has to be controlled by multi-factor authentication, and you have MFA bypass taking place. You aren't aware of it, but when you see it, you can lock that up, right? And then finally, the third thing that identity protection does is it gives us the ability to look at identity risky behaviors. This is especially the threat management side of it, right? It's looking at, can I detect in real time at the source, at the identity management stack? And by the way, this clearly leverages AI, because to be able to do this effectively, you have to have a force multiplier in your capability. And it's the ability to identify and handle threats that are happening against my identity stack and against my identities. So it's looking for things like brute force attack on a particular IDP. It's looking for things like credential stuffing. So it's detecting the threats as they're happening and then immediately sending them over to your security operations center to be handled, for your SIM tool to process it and for your SOAR capability to actually go do something with it. It's especially the biggest thing that we're finding here is when you have workflows that are bypassing critical systems such as your ZTNA, your VPN, and your PAM controls, right? Can you detect when you have those things in place and someone's found a way around them and that's being used? That's the huge thing here. So this is what identity protection is, a critical element of the identity fabric. The combination of two new innovations around identity threat detection response and identity security posture management, and it links the SOC with the identity stack intimately for the first time by addressing identity blind spots, identity infrastructure gaps, as well as identifying risky behaviors like the bypasses. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or want to share your thoughts about this topic, please leave a comment below.